Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, the artist behind Bigelow Fine Arts. Last week wrapped up the title page from Enchanted Forest. Did you follow along and finish it? If you haven't already, let me know how it went. Today I'm beginning a new page from World Within Worlds by Kirby Rosanes. I chose the candles because it wasn't a 2-page spread and I liked how they looked. I wanted something a little shorter for now. I'm not sure how best to break these up, but I decided to put each building into one video. As it took me an hour and a half of coloring time, I've sped it up to something more reasonable to watch. I'm beginning with the shadows, which shouldn't be quite as hard to figure out since most of them have been included in the line art. I'll go through and build up the line art with a layer of burnt sienna in all the places where the wax is overhanging and the left side of anything that could cast a shadow from the flames on the right. The building and candle is curved, but I'm not going to take that into account right now. I also added shadows to the left-hand side of all the columns. With my shadows in place, I now want to come in with the yellow chrome for all the highlights. Technically, this would be anything on the right side that might get hit by the flame's light, but if you watch carefully, you'll see that I am putting down the highlight everywhere that isn't covered by the shadows. And yes, the video clips are out of order. It took me a little time to sort out the best way to get the color I wanted. As I moved down the building, I slowly refined my technique, now that I know what I'm looking for and how the paper feels under the pencil. So I figured I'd start with the best representation of that, then speed up the rest to show the progress of the coloring. As I move through, I'll really be thinking about where shadows will be cast. The light for this candle will be coming from the middle candle. That will be different for the other candles as I progress across the page. I'm using a light hand with my layers, so I have to go through and add many layers to each area to build up a depth of color. This creates a richness to the color since more than one color is going into each area. With my darkest in place and the lightest everywhere else, I'm now going to bring them together with my midtones. I'll begin with the orange glaze, adding in a layer to cover the shadow, basically glazing it with the orange and lightly drawing it into the light chrome yellow. The buildings reminded me of Petra, so I found some pictures of Petra at night by candlelight and based my colors off that image. Once I have my colors lightly blocked in, I'm going to go through and refine the colors and deepen the shadows. This also adds more layers and covers the paper better. Refining means I go back and darken up the shadows again to help them stand out, blending more into the midtones and using the orange to get the colors right. The way I'm using the orange glaze is to bring the light and dark together, blending the colors in the middle as well as hitting the shadow to bring more orange into the color. I use the warm gray 6 to really deepen up the darkest shadows. I then go over everything with the orange glaze to tint everything orange, including the highlights. I don't jump straight in with the orange glaze because it is too orange, but light layers bring a warmth to the other colors, especially the darker shadows. I really want to make sure everything has an orange cast to it, so I'll be going over much of the building with a light layer of the orange glaze, both the shadows and the highlights. This will bring everything together as well as make sure my highlights aren't too bright. In this overhang, I'm using the terracotta to block in more shadow while still adding in the orange that I want in these buildings. Most of the time, I'm using the terracotta. I noticed I didn't use the sanguine hardly at all, but decided to leave it on the list since I began with it. When I got to the steps out front of the building, I colored every other one darker as if the one above was casting a shadow. Looking at it later, I didn't think it looked right. I ended up going over it again to remove the shadow and make the steps more uniform in color. So if you like the effect, go ahead. Otherwise, stick to the lighter color for now. I could see the lack of transition when I sat back. Every time I pause, especially while refining, I'm sitting back and looking at the whole of the picture and not just the part I'm working on. By looking from a distance, I can see how some of the shadows are off or need to be darkened, or how a blend needs to be worked more. Refining is probably the harder part. Sure, I can tell where to put the color, but knowing how dark to go and how far to take the blend takes more work and practice. This is why I keep my layers light and build up. I can move shadows and blending over many layers, and it gives me some flexibility if I don't get it just right, as you'll see in the next video. On to the top of the building, and where I began. I'm working it up a little differently than the bottom, but the main difference is that I'm not using the light chrome yellow as a covering base. I add in my shadows, then I add in the highlights before blending the two together with the midtones. Both methods work, but using the lightest color as a base helps fill in the tooth of the paper and made things a little easier. I left the wax alone at the top, but some of the drips I hit up without realizing they are part of the wax strips and not the actual building. I ended up going through and erasing the extra color for now so I can color them the same as the wax later. I wanted to have the camera in close enough to have the details stand out. These pictures have a lot of tiny details and small areas to fill in. I hope I have the camera in close enough to show everything. Please let me know below. I'm going to wrap things up here. Enjoy watching the rest of the building come to life. This is a fun book and I look forward to doing more in it. Let me know how your coloring is going and if you've been following along. If you have any questions or page requests, please leave them below or on the Patreon post linking this video. I put in a list of chapter breaks in the show notes as well as a list of equipment I have or will be using. And thank you everyone for coming along and joining in with me on this coloring journey. I appreciate all my subscribers and look forward to more of you joining in and coloring along with me. That will only happen if you like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, happy coloring!